Kennedy Cooper, nice to finally be talking to you.
As like I was saying before the show, this feels long overdue to me. Ron, I've been a fan of a lot of stuff that you've done. Of course, great interviews, a lot of really important analysis during some of the election cycles. I especially liked. I thought you brought a very clear and even-handed view to like the way that you talked about Bernie Sanders, which I appreciated. And also, of course, the comedy guitar playing, which never gets old. So, yeah, it's just really great to finally bridge the digital divide and be here.
I appreciate it. Yeah, you're one of my favorite Twitter accounts. You keep the platform, dare I say, somewhat tolerable still. I mean, it's like there's a few accounts where I see them and I go, all right, it's not totally over, and you're one of them. Like I always look forward to your tweets, even though I think we're all on the different platforms too, but they're just not as big. So Twitter's still, I don't know. I guess it's hanging on. Is that fair to say? Or
It is still hanging on. In some ways, it's still the most fun, but only in certain ways.
that's
So
fair.
I want to be really, really clear about that statement because it's awful in some ways now. Definitely a lot more nasty comments and things like that than the past, and a lot less being done about them by Twitter staff. None of which is shocking to anyone. Of course, I'm not telling anybody anything you don't know. But yeah, but on the other hand, like, I don't know, it can still be kind of a fun time. It's still a place where I can quote tweet like a legitimate news source and get like 100 times the likes that they got on their legitimate news article by saying, like, making fun of them. That doesn't get old, you know?
Sure. Yeah, it still has its perks. I mean, I do think overall, like, it's amazing because it's always had its problems, and then
Mhm.
Elon took a very flawed situation and made it a million times worse.
So much
Like,
worse.
and I don't know how so many people don't see that, and I don't know what they're looking at. It's like he took every complaint people had before. He either did nothing or made it worse,
Hmm.
and then he just made it worse in a bunch of other ways. Like there were a bunch of problems that didn't exist before that he brought to the platform.
Yeah, and I think we're in a weird limbo with social media where I think we've yet to see the next thing that's really going to dominate social media, and nobody knows what they want until they see it in that regard. Um, Nobody knew that they wanted Facebook instead of MySpace until they saw Facebook. And then they knew that they wanted Facebook. But it wasn't until you had it in front of you, think like a little before Facebook rolls out when MySpace was still popular. You talk to anybody, uh, you like start describing like you want a new social media platform, they'd be like, no. you know, like
And
especially
they would have
because
been right, I think. I
well,
think MySpace was the best. We didn't know how good we had it, and
we
we
didn't.
threw
I'll
it
say we
away.
didn't know how good we had. I will agree with that. I don't know if it was the best, but I do think, in particular, what I missed the most about MySpace though was what it did for musicians, and we don't have anything like that for musicians now. It's way harder for musicians to get a foothold on the social media platforms that exist now compared to MySpace. Obviously, stuff like TikTok is okay for musicians, and like there are like options out there, but MySpace was like built for you to promote your music.
Right. Right. That was Tom's mission. He really appreciated music, and that's what he wanted to build, and then he took his millions and just isn't it interesting? And I swear we're gonna start the interview. I have a bunch of questions I want to ask you, but it's so interesting how people make it out like he's like there's almost something wrong with him where they're like he just disappeared. Dude got paid millions of dollars and now he's enjoying his life.
Like, he's actually doing the normal thing that people should do when they get rich, which is
Right?
stop trying to make more money and just vibe. Like, like if you don't have like deranged brain where you're just like, well, I have to keep accumulating. I need to be a billionaire. Like most people who like make $10 million or $100 million or some big amount of money all at once just say, okay, cool. I'm done.
Mm-hmm.
I am retired. And that's what Tom did. He was just like, I made MySpace. That's my contribution to the world. I'm done. And every now and again, he'll show up at a tech conference and be like, hey, look at this thing. That's kind of neat. But he's not really like, he never really like plunges in and gets deeply involved the way other guys will. He'll just show up once in a while and be like, hey, remember me? I'm Tom from MySpace. I think that, this product that lets you smell video games is cool or something like that. You know? Did you see that?
No, I didn't
Yeah,
see that
that's
specifically.
a thing.
Usually I just see him traveling. He's just like, yeah, I have millions of dollars. I can't take it with me when I die. And I'm enjoying the world. I'm embracing it. And then you see these news articles where they're just going, oh my God, he disappeared. Why isn't he trying to do something else? It's like he is doing so. He's
Whatever
sharing his
happened
photography.
to MySpace, Tom?
Yeah.
Like, dude's just vibing.
Every 6 months they put out that article and we're supposed to be shocked. They're just like,
And like
he's
I say,
still
it's not
enjoying
even
his
like
life.
every now and again he shows up to a tech conference or something. It's not even like he doesn't poke his nose in once in a while and be like, yeah, I still like tech. You know? like people have heard from him. It's not like everyone's you read the article and Mark Zuckerberg's like, the last time Tom called me was 10 years ago. I've been searching for him I've used the full resources of Facebook. I've spent $500,000 trying to find Tom, and I can't find him. Not a trace.
Meanwhile, he has this active Instagram where he's just like, hey, I'm in. I
I'm in
think
the
he's on
Bahamas
Instagram. Maybe
right
he's
now.
not. Yeah, right. So, what got you into politics?
Whoa, that's a crazy question.
Right.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think for starters, just growing up in the struggle.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think a lot of people understand that probably watch your show, I'm guessing. No one, I do believe that thing of like, no one is born woke, and I wasn't born woke. But I had some political sensitivity from a young age that was a little bit more pronounced than some of my peers because my childhood was not easy.
Where'd you grow up?
Huh?
Where'd you grow up?
A lot of places, which is part of the, moving around a lot. My parents were in a lot of ways they tried their best, but they both came from very little, and they had to work really hard to try to raise us out of that, and they did manage to get us to a slightly better position than we were in. Like, we were still solidly working class, but we were not like, by the time I was in high school, we were no longer like poor. We were like comfortably working class, and like, I had like some things and my life was kind of all right, but like it took a lot of years to get there, and so we moved around a lot. But I spent a big part of my childhood on the outskirts of Athens, Ohio, which is a very impoverished area if you don't know anything about that. But I didn't realize in some ways how traumatizing some of my own poverty experiences were until later, because some of my friends were going through things so much worse that I was just coming home thinking like, oh, it could be worse,
Wow. Like
But that
what?
was also very radicalizing because it was hard for me to be, even as a young kid, it was hard for me to watch that and think like, why can't any of us seem to do anything about this?
Is
Why do I
Athens?
have friends that are like hungry,
Yeah. Well, is Athens is where OU is, right?
Uh-huh.
Okay, yeah. I grew up in Pittsburgh, so I'm like I'm somewhat familiar.
The vague region there a little bit. Yeah.
I know the vague region, and I have probably still, even at this point in my life, driven through Ohio more than any other place in the freaking world because I went to college in Indiana.
Oh,
So
okay.
I did the Western PA to Indiana drive like
Yeah.
many times per year, and so And then just later, like as a road comic and stuff. I mean, I've just spent a lot
Mhm.
of time driving around Ohio, but but yeah. So I want to ask you because I know I know you've been a big part of the Bernie movement and you participate in the kind of online, I don't know what you even want to call it now, like indie media space, podcasting space. I
Mhm.
don't know, but whatever it is, we both know what it is. And
Yeah, I know
um,
what you mean.
do you feel like, as far as the information battle goes, have we lost or are
Yeah.
we losing? Okay.
Um, we've lost at least in some respects. But now I actually am a political optimist in some ways, and I actually don't think our situation is by any means hopeless. But I think that a combination of, I don't want to say it was all bad actors, because I also think a lot of people make bad decisions while thinking they're making good decisions, which is also just very normal. I mean, I do that all the time. And uh, uh, I think that I think there were problems internally with the kind of like left media space, whatever we want to call it, where I think that there was not enough cooperation, and there was a lot of sense of just like a overly intense need to like fight with each other and things to an extent, and also then to like protect the wrong people. And straight up, of course, like there were bad actors to some extent, and I'm not saying like CIA plants. I'm talking like sex pests who wanted to get famous so they could abuse people and things like that, you know.
Hmm.
And there were a number of those in our 2020 media sphere, sadly.
Hmm.
And so I think that that eroded a lot of the confidence in that whole side of things. And I also think that externally, we've been pushed on by a lot of people, and that's even more significant in a lot of ways. That I think there've been concentrated efforts to prevent this thing from growing.
Yeah.
And by no group more so than the Democrats, which is so sad to say. um, because I'd really love to say it was the Republicans doing the most, because I hate them more on some levels. But no, the liberals have done as much to crush left media as any group, tragically. And that's been a very sad thing to witness as well. That said, I think leftist ideas will always win given enough time, presentation, and things like that. And I think, we may have lost this present battle, but when we were having our moment in 2020, it felt like a moment that arrived suddenly that seemed magical, like it would have almost never happened. And then suddenly we had this zeitgeist where suddenly talking about socialism wasn't weird.
That's
And
true.
so, have we lost the present battle? Yes. But we won such a significant victory in 2020 that we should not lose hope for the future, because clearly we could have just incredible success again. That's what I believe.
I like that. I mean, I really hope that's 100% correct, because and I think that's a very fair analysis. I don't I just feel like talking about it more like honed in 2016, like many presidential cycles, you had this new group of people that sort of had an awakening, and they
Mhm.
got turned on to democratic socialist ideas via the Bernie Sanders movement. And for a lot of people who were already leftists, we had this big moment of optimism where it's like, whoa, there's more of us than we realized. There's an opportunity to really grow these ideas.
Mhm.
And I feel like over the past 8 years, 7 going on 8 years, for a large list of reasons, some of which you've mentioned, and there's even more, um, we lost a lot of those people to like literally the LaRouche cult and shit like that. And when you're losing to that, you gotta take a step back and be like, "Oh, something's wrong here." And
Yeah.
I'm the first to have the like. I mean, I have the awareness of it's like you know, I'm sure I made mistakes. I'm sure we all did.
Mhm.
Like we're all part of it. Like I use the collective we because it's like, man, the
No,
fact that we're
definitely.
losing here, something's up. You know?
Obviously, I think I have some informed critiques about what happened, but I can also point to some of my own behavior during that period and say, "Yep, I did not help with some of that." I was not helping with that one. um, but ironically for me, you mentioned 2016. I was actually extremely politically cynical around that time period.
Mhm.
And 2020 gave me a lot of hope, actually.
Hmm.
Um,
Why
uh,
is that?
because I just saw, every political cycle, people get upset, and like you say, like there's a potential for that like awakening, but sometimes they just kind of get upset and it goes away. A
Mm,
great example would be like the Bush years, which really didn't turn into a lot of long-term political action. And that doesn't make a lot of sense because the Bush years were really bad and extremely fascistic.
mhm.
Um, and but a lot of Americans were comfortable during those years. And so a lot of people just kind of, even if they were upset by some of it, they turned a blind eye to some extent, or they just gave up or whatever. And so, but that 2016 to 2020 change was a more substantive political change. Seeing like the growth of the DSA during that period. Now, I'm not the DSA's biggest fan. We could talk till we're blue in the face about the goods and bads of that organization.
Yeah. I mean,
Um,
we could do that for any organization, really.
True.
But yeah, I mean, the
uh,
DSA, there's definitely been some steps that I've not agreed with.
yeah, there's been a few issues with the DSA where I've parted with them very strongly. I want to be clear about that, but it's not like it was all bad.
Sure.
I just don't want someone to come in here, oh, Kennedy's a DSA fan, when it's like, guys, I'm an anarchist. Okay. And I always have people in my replies like, Kennedy's a Russia fan. And I'm like, go find me one pro Russia post I've ever made. I stand against America's imperialistic actions regarding Russia and Ukraine, but I stand with Ukraine intrinsically as an oppressed people, regardless of that. And most people just can't handle the nuance of a take like that,
No,
Like,
no one can handle any nuance when it comes to any of that stuff. They can't handle the nuance of like, hey, maybe there's multiple bad guys across the board, and they can't
right,
handle the nuance of they really even just can't handle the nuance of I'm against imperialism in all of its
right.
forms. Like they just can't handle that.
Yeah, so that's always fun. And so yeah, I'm just getting this out there because I don't want somebody to be, oh, Kennedy's the big DSA. I'm not. Uh, but watching the DSA grow from 2016 to 2020 was a palpable sign of political change in this country and political education in this country. And it was really exciting to watch. And like in 2016, I was one of those people that was like, Bernie's just a sellout trying to co-opt the left. Like I was that cynical back then, and I came around. I came all the way around, and by 2020, I was like, Bernie's a sellout, but he's gonna get us healthcare. I think. Let's do this.
Yeah, I mean,
Like,
that's the thing. I mean, Bernie, and look, yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like, I think Bernie was just in the right place at the right time. And like to be fair to the guy, he didn't really want the gig. He wanted Liz Warren to do it, but she didn't want
right,
to. So he's like, okay, I guess it's gonna have to be me. I'm like old and not many people know who I am. And like, but and I mean, as much as Bernie has done many things that have ticked me off, and will do many more. I mean, dude, not a day goes by where I don't wish he was president. I
oh,
mean,
yeah,
all the
same.
executive orders he would have done.
Same. Yeah. Easily, easily. And we could go on till we're blue in the face about all the things that are wrong with him. But even though I'll kind of jokingly call him a sellout here in this conversation, I'm sure if I sat down with Bernie Sanders for 2 hours, I would agree with him on like 80% of everything. And that's way better than I could say about a lot of our politicians. Like,
Yeah.
vastly better.
Well, it's one of those things too, and again, there is no excuse for some of the stuff Bernie has done. There's no excuse for the
No,
squad refusing to vote as a block. I'm not excusing any of that.
no,
But
and we're
there's
definitely not excusing his stance on Palestine. I'll be really fucking clear about that one.
absolutely, I'm with you. But there's still this reality of it where I feel like if you or I sat down with them and had a private conversation, they would just go, "Look at who our frickin' colleagues are. And whether you like it or not, that's what we have to work with."
And a lot of people don't love this answer because it's not a fun answer and it's not an answer that implies a fast solution or things like that. But the real solution is to elect 200 squad members, not
Right,
4.
right,
You can't expect these 4 people to really do anything.
right. Well,
Um,
especially if they're not gonna vote as a frickin' block, which again,
yeah,
not excusing that.
especially
It's
not if they're not gonna do
unacceptable,
that. But
but
even if they were voting as a block, it's too small to even they could maybe leverage a few bills and make a few things happen, but they couldn't, like, throw their weight and be like,
no.
we're hard stopping the budget or something, you know?
They couldn't throw their weight, they couldn't make many demands, but what they could do is people would have to come to them. If
Yes,
they were
yes.
voting as a block all the time, and that's what's a little frustrating because, okay, I take the point that they're outnumbered. Nobody can deny that.
Mhm.
But when you're not using the leverage you do have, even though it's not enough, but when you're not using it, it's sort of like it's like a building's on fire and we need more supplies. It's like, yes, you do, but you're not even using that hose that you do. Can you start using the thing you have?
Right,
And we're
right.
working on getting more supplies, but you're like, you're doing nothing and the house is getting worse. You have
Well,
a
and
hose right there.
also,
You got to at
to
least
your
use it.
point, how do you grow that block if you don't establish it, right?
Right. Right.
Because there are people in the house who have wishy-washy politics that might actually be pushed left. Like, we joke about the push left thing a lot,
Yeah.
and you can't do that to Biden, okay? But there are people in the House that could be pushed left. There are Democrats in the House with wishy-washy politics who sometimes kind of vote progressive, sometimes kind of vote centrist, and it just depends on where the winds are blowing at a given moment, right? And if the squad came together and formed a coherent block and like took power, then there would be wishy-washy people in the House that said, "Well, fuck it, I'm a progressive now because I'm not getting this kind of power any other way."
Yeah. Well, not just that, but when it comes to policy battles, if they're scared they're going to lose their job, they'll vote the way you want. I mean, that's just
Yep.
how it works. And that's why I always go to the mat for policy battles because I just go,
Mhm.
look, when they're scared a job's at stake for them, they're going to go to their donors and say, sorry, I got to give the people this one because otherwise I might not get reelected and the person they replace me with might not be as nice to you guys. So sorry, we got to do this. And so it's like, you'll get the votes you want when they think a job is at stake.
Yeah.
It's just sadly too often they never have to worry about that. They realize a job's not at stake because it's like, well, who are you going to replace me with? Where are you going to go? What are you going to do? You
Mhm.
you want more Ted Cruz? You want more of that?
Right, right. Um, yeah, it's like the meme I've seen going around recently where it's like, Democrats are like a guy in a ski mask and they're holding a gun labeled Republicans to voters' heads, like it's all too often that rather than something cooperative or pleasant. It's
Sure.
very coercive. And it's okay for us to want things from our elected representatives.
It's how it's
Uh
supposed to work, I thought.
Like, yeah, it's okay. It's okay. It's all right. It's a sign of a functioning democracy to criticize the people you vote for. I voted for Joe last time. I'm gonna vote for him again, reluctantly.
Sure.
But I made a commitment to do it a while ago, and I'm gonna keep that promise. Um, I sort of, I loosely, quasi, almost sold my vote, but my lawyer agreed it was safe enough. But I put it out there. I said, listen, if one of you staunch liberals who wants me to vote for Joe Biden so bad will give like a major, like thousands of dollars donation to a police abolition organization, I will vote for Joe. And guess
Did it
what
happen?
happened?
Really?
$2,000 to BLM Cleveland.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
So that because I was gonna ask you what made you make that pledge, and so that's what made you make the
that's
pledge.
what made me make that. And this was from somebody who is a relatively staunch liberal who does not see eye to eye with me a lot, but has continued to not block me on social media, follow my posts, and at least hear me out on certain issues. And they've been hearing me out on police abolition. And so they said, okay, fuck it. I will give $2,000 to a police abolition org if you promise to vote for Joe Biden. This is a little, I don't want to recommend anybody does this because it's a little bit legally sketchy. But
Understood.
vote swapping is legal. We felt in the eyes of by we, I mean me and my lawyer, we felt in the eyes of the law that probably this is close to vote swapping. I'm not taking a direct benefit. I have no ties to BLM Cleveland. I told them to pick an organization in their area. So they picked the org. So I want to be clear about that. Like, I didn't say BLM Cleveland,
Mm-hmm.
I said pick a police abolition organization in your area, give them money, I'll vote for Joe. And it happened.
We're
And
not
you
we're
know
not
what?
we're not recommending this. We're just saying what happened.
I'm not, yeah, again, not recommending this. But I am saying that for me, I was willing to take that small risk because that's worth it to me to vote for Joe, honestly. Like,
Sure.
and like some people be like, I have to take a principled stance, not vote for him. I'm like, if somebody will give to a police abolition org, I will go vote for this guy. It's not a big deal.
It's definitely a much I mean, I think people put way too much stock in a presidential vote. I think people just put way too much stock into it.
Yeah,
Because, like, for me, I mean, look, I live in California. So I live in I don't like to use the word safe state because I don't think there's anything safe about the electoral college. So I just
true.
refer to it as decided. Like my state is decided. I can vote
Yeah,
however I want. It will not make a difference at all. So to me, it's a no-brainer. Like, well, of course I'm going to vote for somebody who actually, reflects the types of things I want to see. And hopefully that person will get to 5% so that we have the hope of a better tomorrow. To me, that's like just a no-brainer when you live in a decided state. So I've always just kind of voted green. I get that somebody who lives in a swing state has a more difficult decision than I do. I understand that. And I don't really tell people who to vote for. I don't really see
yeah.
I don't really think it's a productive thing to do. So, my thing is like, I'll tell you what I'm going to do as a Californian. And
Mhm.
if you're in a different situation, I get it. Whatever you just say, I mean, I still
Yeah.
get emails of people, telling me what they're doing and trying to like, I don't know what they want. I don't know if they want me to justify it or what. But I just go like I'm like, why are you telling me? I'm like, do you like I'm not gonna tell you what to do. Like, and I've gotten both of them. I've gotten like, well, I can't in good conscience ever. And I'm like, okay, I understand that. And then
Yeah.
other people are like, I have to hold my nose. I'm like, yeah, I get it. That's fine. I'm like, if you keep wanting validation from like a random online comedian, like maybe like I feel like that's a you problem, but I'm not gonna give you validation one way or another. It's not my place.
Yeah, totally. When we were still doing Not Safe for Wonks, we put out tactical voting guides, which
Hmm.
rather than encourage any particular vote, we said, here's some of our recommendations based on if you live in a safe state or a red state or a swing state or and here's how you might make decisions about how to best use your vote in a way that feels good for you based on where you live and stuff like that. But we never told people vote this way,
Sure.
and it's just like yeah, yeah, a lot of people, yeah, like you say, they're looking for too much validation in some of these political decisions. And uh, if you want more political validation, my recommendation is volunteer time somewhere.
Yeah.
Like,
Absolutely.
your vote's never going to earn you that much political validation. But
No.
if you did 10 hours a month at a soup kitchen, people in your community would goddamn pat you on the back.
I mean, that's where I'm at too, because I just think I'm like, look, first of all, if electoralism is your bag, the most important votes you cast aren't for president anyway. The most
So
important
true.
votes you cast are for city council or school board or mayor. I mean, those are the votes where it's like you can really make a difference, and that's going to have a big impact on your
Yep.
community. And so those are your most important votes anyway. So why don't you start there? And also, it's like, you look at mutual aid, you look at things like that. It's like that's where you can really do stuff. I mean, that's
Mhm.
just infinitely more important than what your voting strategy is.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I'm angry at the system that puts people in these situations, not the people who have to deal with it.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
if you're gonna do the mental gymnastics to like try to justify Trump or something like that, I'll explain why I think that's a bunch of bullshit. But you know,
Sure. Yeah. There are limits.
yeah,
But yeah, beyond some reasonable limits, most people don't really offend me with their politics, and I would rather look for some shared common ground to find, ways to build political power together than not. Um, and the people that do offend me with their politics, well, Mao had solutions for people like that, I think. I haven't read enough of his stuff though, so I couldn't tell you what they are.
Do you think there is, as far as like lefty, progressive, although that term's been completely, co-opted now, but like as far as like lefty, is there a movement? Does one exist? Is it a thing?
I think that we are somewhat lacking in that regard in terms of we don't have there's not a lot of cohesion in leftist thought in America. We don't have like a bunch of leaders that we agree on. Even some of the most like non-controversial figures are still controversial. Uh, Good example would be like Angela Davis. I feel like her name should be kind of uncontroversial in leftist spaces, but it's not. Um, you know, uh, there are people that completely disagree with her beliefs and takes on things, and so strongly that they don't even want her mentioned in the charter or whatever. Um, and so I don't think that we have a cohesive school of leftist thought in the United States. And I think what's challenging about that is I think that a new kind of leftist thought is struggling to be born, because I think that the highly leader based leftist thought of a century or so ago is not going to work now. I think that we are moving past the need for as much strong leadership figure. And in fact, that like, even if a lot of Americans like struggle to articulate this, I think most of, especially young Americans, just sort of reflexively get upset when presented with a strong leadership figure.
Mm.
um, I think a lot of us have sort of moved away from that as something that feels comfortable, desirable, or beneficial. And I think that as a result, we're not going to have another Marx or Lenin necessarily. Um, uh, I just don't see that necessarily as being the way that the next thing happens. And I kind of see this is just a guess, of course. I have no idea, but I kind of see like maybe like a sort of aesthetic or symbol based leftism being the way of the future.
Hmm.
And that sounds negative on first glance, but it doesn't have to be.
Well, what do you mean? Like,
I mean that like rather than being like rather than showing your affiliation by which leaders you read and support and things like that, that you would show your affiliation through more aesthetic means. And I think we see some of that already. I just think it hasn't like gelled into a final form or anything like that. But like I think a lot of people like comparative like 100 years ago, it was a lot more common to like, again, like really announce your beliefs based on like who you were reading.
hmm.
or who you were hanging out with. And now it's a lot more so like people announce their beliefs by what they put up on their wall and stuff like that. Like I have my bisexual pride flag in the background here, right? Like that's a political statement. And furthermore, it implies in this modern moment, it implies a certain amount of philosophy and ideology. Like it's not just like, yeah, I'll fuck people that have different stuff in their pants. It's like bisexual theory is like a part of politics right now, and is like this idea that is about like breaking down barriers and stuff like that to some extent. And so like, if you are like proudly displaying something like that, a lot of people are going to assume in this modern era, not just that you're bi, but that you care about the ideas. And so I think that kind of aesthetic thing is becoming more common, and I could see that being the future, like I said, possibly of like a less leader focused and more focused on like aesthetic and symbols and stuff like that, as like this is how we identify what we believe and share that with each other.
As far as like the lefty media space that we talked about, do you feel like it has helped or harmed?
I think it's been overall positive. I think it has educated a lot of people and brought a lot of people into the space in some way. But I think that there are flaws, and the biggest flaw is just the sort of purity politics that you get a lot in some of these leftist spaces, where it's like, you have to clear some bar and it's different depending on who you're talking to, and all this and that. And it's like, I do agree that people need to pass a bar, but we should be setting the bars as low as we're comfortable, is the best way I can put it, in terms of who we consider to be allowed to be in the movement. Like personally, I don't want ex-cops in my movement, even if they've quit. That's just a place I draw a line, I could make some exceptions, but in general,
what if they were whistleblower cops?
That could be an exception. Like I said, I could make some exceptions to that, but like in general, if somebody was like, "Hey, I quit the police force 6 months ago," I'd be like, "Great, you can be an activist in 10 years, maybe."
Is that a wire sticking out of your shirt?
Yeah, like.
How do you do, fellow activist? I quit. Wink, wink.
So, I do have. I think we should set a bar.
Sure.
But I think that the bar should be as low as we're possibly comfortable with, not as high as we can possibly imagine. And I find that I see the latter happening a lot in online leftist spaces, where the bar is as high as you can possibly imagine it being. And realistically, that means that the bar is wherever you are.
Right.
Which of course is always funny to watch those evolutions, because, it'll be like, this is their purity standard now. And then 6 months later, it'll be different because they've changed, but they didn't let go of the idea of the purity standard. So I think overall, it has been beneficial. It's still beneficial. It still has the ability to be beneficial, this left media space, but we gotta set that bar lower and let people come participate. If you're not like a proud fascist, if you're not like a bigot, like if you're not like an absolute fuckhead, there should be space for you over here on the left. Like it should be the majority of people are welcome here and a very small portion are not the other way around.
Right. Well, and they are the opposite on the right.
Yeah.
I mean, there's been tons of, there's been some funny bits about it, and there's been like all kinds of quotes. Like I think the most famous is I don't know who said it first, but the right looks for converts, the left looks for traitors. It is the freaking truth. Now, to give a little bit of grace here, there's a reason for that, and the reason is because historically the left has been infiltrated for 100 years.
Yeah, and people have died because of that shit. Like,
Right.
it's not
Yeah.
like these movements got dissolved or, you know, your favored political candidate didn't win. It's like, no, leftist movements have been infiltrated, and then, like, all the leaders were assassinated. Like,
Right.
that shit has happened. So, yes, there is a reason to be sensitive to some extent.
Right.
And, I believe it was, uh, uh, uh I believe it was Abby Hoffman in Steal This Book who said you shouldn't organize with somebody that you haven't known for, I think he said 7 years.
It's fair. Yeah, that's fair.
Um, and that was his way of solving this problem. So, like, you know, clearly this is a real ass problem for somebody to. That's a radical, like, extreme solution. And it's like, but and yet, like, it doesn't really seem that unreasonable because of the things that have happened. You
Yeah.
know.
I mean, so
Um,
so it's like some of the paranoia is somewhat justified, but, when you're taking it to this place where, it's almost like you give people a freaking exam, and if they don't check every single box, like, "Well, you're out. We're the smallest group politically in the country, but sorry, no room for you."
Yeah, we got to get away from that somehow, and I do believe that you need to organize, especially important things with trusted people. I do believe that you have to be careful. I'm very staunch about that. I post a lot online about OPSEC and stuff like that. It's not one of my biggest topics, but it is something that I post about sometimes, especially just when I see people doing things that they shouldn't do. I will post sometimes and say, "Hey, if you are planning this type of political action, here's the amount of posts you should make about it." And then the number is 0. You know, I do think we need to be careful with our movements, but there has to be some, like, a spectrum or something, maybe. There, like, where it's like, okay, there's some organizing that's too sensitive to do with anybody except, like, people that you've maybe known for 7+ years. There's other stuff that you can invite the world to join. Drawing clearer lines between some of that might help.
Sure. Yeah, yeah.
um, and then also having allyship between the, because it's like, ideally what I'm describing right now could exist between groups like, let's say, PSL over here on the more, like, we're going to be cautious and do the more sensitive organizing, and then DSA over here, like, all are welcome, except they don't get along whatsoever.
Right.
There's no allyship between those two groups.
Which is crazy to see. I mean, again, it's like we're by far. I mean, when you look at just all the different parties and stuff like that, you would think there's a ton of lefty thought going on in the United States because they have I mean, look at all these sects we have, but it's like no, it's like it's the same people all just infighting, and it's like we're actually by far the smallest group politically. If we all got together under one umbrella, like either politically or otherwise, we would still be the smallest sect politically, but we'd at least be a force to be reckoned with. I don't have the solution for all this,
No,
but
not me either whatsoever.
yeah, I mean, but I just wish I knew like what the holdup really was. Like when you really get down to it. And I think it's all the stuff we've mentioned, but
Yeah.
but yeah, how do you overcome that? Well, where do you get your hope from?
That's a great question, and there's a few places I get my hope from. First I'll go philosophical, then I'll go personal. So philosophically, the Zapatistas have been one of my greatest political inspirations, and they say that their philosophy is the philosophy of hope. And I felt like reading their story, that if they could manage to find hope in a situation that makes what we have going on in America seem peachy keen. I mean, we're talking about, like, impoverishment, like, none of us can hardly understand. We're talking, like, the Zapatistas were organizing in these farming villages where the government had simply never provided anything. like anything. Like really. And these were people with, facing incredible odds and extreme desperation, and they found hope. And I just feel like if they didn't allow themselves to be hopeless, I can't allow myself to be hopeless. Like, it's just not right. How privileged would it be of me to say I'm without hope here in my comfortable house with access to all kinds of technology, you know, with access to all kinds of organizing tools that these people did not have, you know, with a smartphone that can give me access to basically any person on the planet. Uh, and I've made friends with celebrities over Twitter. It happens. I'm not saying I've become best buds with anybody, but I exchanged a few messages with David Cross. That was fucking awesome. Um, uh, uh, and he actually said, like, he appreciated my politics. Like, how cool is that? Um, wow, I have this technology that makes something like that possible, that I could politically influence a celebrity. None of the Zapatistas had that. Holy shit. Can you imagine how thrilled they would have been if you had told them you can influence celebrities and bring them to your political side?
Mhm.
And we were bringing you a technology to do that. They would have lost their minds. They didn't have anything like that. You know what they did to prepare for their revolution? They marched in the rain. They fucking, made camps in the wilderness and shit like that pretty much no Americans are prepared to do. um uh if they didn't lose hope, again, how privileged would I have to be to lose hope? How ridiculously just completely stuck in my first world luxury would I have to be to lose hope? Like, we could have a revolution of all people that already have fucking cars. Like, we have transportation for a revolution. These people were on foot for their whole revolution, basically. Just incredible, So yeah, I just refuse to lose hope in the light of that. The other things that bring me hope are just things that I see in the world and in my own life that make me happy. There's just the joy of the wonderful people in my life, and just seeing what, like anytime that my friends are able to accomplish something cool or something good happens here in this city or anything like that, it's just hard not to think that, maybe something better is possible. And like here in Albuquerque, we made the buses free a few years ago.
Mm.
Really powerful stuff that has been incredible for the working class community of the city. Um, uh, uh, that's something that just feels like, wow, things are possible. We had to push hard to make that happen as a city. But we did it. And, it's been this really good thing. That brings me a lot of hope. Um, and just, yeah, the younger generations too. I don't spend a ton of time around kids just because the way my life is. But, every now and again, I have the opportunity to like observe children learning and growing or something like that. And I think, wow, maybe good things are possible. Especially just you watch like the young people these days, and it's like I just read an article about how Gen Z is like the most anti-car generation ever and is like not
I saw
driving
that.
very much.
Yeah.
That's so hopeful.
Yeah. Well, and they also they're not big fans of capitalism.
No.
I mean, yeah, it is encouraging. I'm ready to put them in charge now. Well, not literally now, but you know what I mean. Um,
Yeah.
no, that was where can people go to learn more about you?
Well, I'm on Twitter, unfortunately. At Kennedy T. Cooper. I'm also on Blue Sky and Instagram at Kennedy T. Cooper. Those are the three main socials that I use. I don't have a lot going on Instagram, but I'd like to maybe change that. Um, Also, can I plug something that I'm working on?
Of course.
That's like well, it's a little bit of a business venture, so
Okay. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm starting my own food related business this year. It's something that I'm really passionate about that I've been wanting to do. It's called Secret Cellar Charcuterie. I'm making 100% of everything on the charcuterie boards from scratch with using local ingredients. So it's very different than just like if you've seen like somebody just selling charcuterie boards online and it's just like everything's imported. I'm trying to do something very different with what I'm making. I've been doing craft butchery for 10 years. Getting into salumi has been really satisfying. And I know a lot of your viewers won't live here, so they can't necessarily participate that much in the business. But I just want to let people know that this is going to be my thing and to expect to see a lot of food stuff coming from me in the coming months, because this is something that I've been working really hard on, that I'm really excited about, that I'm truly passionate about. And I really hope to have my own, relatively ethical micro business that can at least support me.
That's all.
Uh, yeah.
So, you'll post about that on your social media. So if people follow you, they'll be able to learn about the business, and if they're
Yeah,
in
there's gonna be.
Albuquerque.
I've already been posting a little bit, but there's gonna be a lot more stuff coming. So just follow me, Kennedy T Cooper on socials. But I just kind of want to let people know this is coming. This is something I'm very excited about, and I'm working on some really cool stuff that goes along with it. Like I want to make a documentary film about where food comes from. I don't want to give away too much about that, but I'm seeking grant money to make that, and I am very hopeful that that might actually happen. Just working on some like really exciting things there, and just very hopeful that I can make an impact on some of the things that matter to me most. And sustainable agriculture, regenerative agriculture, things like of that nature, super important to me. If I can't change everything in my lifetime, then transportation and agriculture are going to be the two issues that I fight for till I die.
And those are huge pillars, though. I mean, I really we don't have time to like dive into this now, but I think, and I'm assuming you would probably agree with this. Changing our food culture is something that is not talked about often, but it would make such a big freaking difference in the world.
Yeah, huge difference. And if you ever want to have me back sometime, we could just talk food politics the whole time, because that's something I'm very passionate about.
I would love that. Well, thanks so much for doing this.
Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity, and this has been such a fun, pleasant chat, and I'm just really glad.